you ever start to say something and then completely forget what you're about to say? That's this episode.
Yeah, I got balls, course I read. I got balls, won't you listen to me?
Hello, 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 and welcome to The Author Has Thoughts. I am the author in question, Gary Ballard. If you don't know me or you've just come here because you bought the latest episode of my Kindle Vella series, there's a video up here that's going to tell you more about, the me and the stuff we're talking about. Another one will probably be over here that's talking about Hiss Whistle Dead itself, the series and novel. So without further ado, let's get to my thoughts. So this episode is going to be pretty straightforward. It takes a lot of cues from other MOG-like situations that I've had in the past in Bridge Chronicles stories. Shell finds out that her brother Lillian was in a guild or an outfit in the World War II video game terms called the Fighting Finest, and they are having a memorial service for Lillian online. MOGs, if you don't know, it stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Games. They were a much bigger thing back when I started writing the Bridge Chronicles. But, even in 2008, they were kind of on the wane because World of Warcraft had come out and absolutely conquered the market. To my knowledge, there hasn't really been a successful WoW, EverQuest style MOG release since, at least not on the level of WoW. Like there's been some successes, but nothing to that effect. Some have flopped. A lot have flopped, actually. Some have hung around at varying levels of success. Things like Final Fantasy XIV has probably been the most successful at hanging out. But by and large, what we used to think of as MOGs are now a zombie market. But by the same token, the definition of what an MOG is should probably morph a bit from what it was back then. Because back then it was really about a very specific genre of multiplayer game, the multiplayer role-playing game, which has its roots based very much in Dungeons & Dragons fantasy game frameworks. But if we're talking about massive online games, you have to include games like Fortnite, Call of Duty. I mean, they've probably had just as many, if not more, concurrent users on a daily basis than games like WoW. They just don't happen to all be in the same shared world. I mean, it's very compartmentalized, but there's not a whole overarching world, but it is still very similar in terms of online, massively multiplayer. My thought process behind the Fighting Finest, it was a Call of Duty World War II style game, but with steampunk fantasy elements. Lillian loved the game, and they played it in a creche, even though they weren't a hacker, simply because the experience within a creche is more immersive. That's what the creche is there for. It's some kind of sensory deprivation thing. But like any tech of this type, there are going to be creches that are built for the hardcore hackers like Shell, and then there's the consumer grade stuff that exists in varying levels. And I've also always envisioned that there's this lesser level of sensory deprivation, full environment replacement tech. I called it Trodes, which is of course short for electrodes. It's just these two little pads that you attach to your forehead, and it does the same thing as a creche. It shuts off your body's sensory inputs in favor of the electronic input that's coming from the trodes. It's not nearly as effective because, the body kind of fights the trodes. The sensory deprivation part is weak, and it's very easy for somebody using trodes to feel the things that their body experiences, which will interfere with the immersion of that virtual environment. Also, it's just not as fast an experience because it's not as direct. It doesn't jack directly into the neck and into the nervous system. It's probably like the difference between playing a full 3D game on your phone, little tiny phone, and playing the same game on this monster PC with a giant ass monitor. Lillian plays Fighting Finest. They joined a guild, and were well regarded in the guild. Back in the days of EverQuest and other MOGs like that, the guilds would often have characters get married in game who had never actually met in real life, and they weren't, a couple in real life. They were role-playing their characters being a couple. Of course, there were also people who met in real life, or who did have relationships outside of the characters, but they would get, let's say they get married in game, there would be these online to-dos. I'm pretty sure after I left, the guild that I helped found in EverQuest has had at least one funeral for someone that died in real life. Whatever it is, it's communities doing what communities do, even if most of them have never met in the flesh. They get together, they celebrate lost loved ones, they celebrate the addition of new members, new relationships, things like that. Shell goes into this gathering hoping to find out something about her brother, maybe see if the cause of their stroke was a global net fight they'd gotten into in the game. The game itself is not one that would usually cause that sort of damage. You have to have other software to cause that kind of damage. So this is where Shell starts to find out that her brother wasn't always as open with her as she thought they were. Turns out Lillian had been involved in a throuple, but they'd never actually shared that with Shell. This is probably the first hint that Shell gets that while she knew and loved her brother, Lillian didn't share everything with Shell. There were parts of their lives that weren't an open book to her. I've seen it many times with my own siblings where, when you're younger, you'll have this very open relationship. As you all move out of your parents' house and make lives of your own, the relationship's going to grow more distant whether you want it to or not. It almost has to, because that sibling is not there with you every day, is not close to you every day. So you won't experience things like relationships in the same way that you did, say, when, you were in high school with that sibling. Nichelle had known about some of Lillian's exes, such as Anais, but she didn't even know that these characters, Ted and Candace, existed. And right at the end of the story, and I'm not really giving any spoilers, this is not so much a spoiler of the story, Candace kind of gives the reader a clue as to what Shell's really doing, even if Shell can't recognize it. This investigation is about Shell trying to find some meaning in Lillian's death, as much as it is about finding out if someone killed them or not. Which, let's face it, that's really what the grieving process is all about. Recognizing that death happens to all of us. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it comes out of absolutely nowhere. It almost always actively resists our attempts to reconcile our feelings on the subject, because we desire the life with this person we had before, and now there's just that void. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the episode that it was talking about. If you haven't already grabbed the episode, links in the description. Like and subscribe so that you are notified when the next episode comes out, which will be next week. We're talking about episode 5. I got socials over here. Hit me up on, Instagram. You'll see a lot of my photography and things like that I'm getting into. Links in the description for how to buy all my other books, including, the other Bridge Chronicles stories, as well as my Cthulhu Mythos reimagining. My name is Gary Ballard, and these have been my thoughts.
1, 2, 3, 4.